Hey guys, this is Sujiram and here is Pankaj Rai from Hyderabad and he is a Google developer expert for Flutter and today's event topic is about Firebase with Jetpack Compose and yeah, let's get started.
Hey everyone, I'm Pankaj Rai, GD for Firebase. I have over 6 years of experience in creating Android applications and I'm using Firebase since 4 or 5 years. So today let's talk about the services of Firebase and Jetpack Compose. So let me first start with what is Firebase and why should you use Firebase? So Firebase is a Google platform for Android, iOS, and web. It's a single platform where you get so many services. Using these services, you can not just create application, but even host it. Let's check this out. So these are all the services offered by Firebase. We have the categories, build, improve, and grow. All those services which are listed in build, they are actually helpful to create application. Means to add some sort of functionality which is related to the database or even machine learning. Like for example, authentication. So authentication is something which is most common across many of the application or even the website. So Firebase offers you a free authentication mechanism too. Even if you have your website, but you want to host it somewhere, then rather than buying a domain, you could host your website on Firebase. Cloud function is something which is sort of doing some changes on the server side without writing even a single piece of code at the computing side, so either on mobile or web. Likewise, we have so many services. MLKit was one of the service with Firebase, but now MLKit is a standalone platform where you can add machine learning to your Android or iOS application using MLKit. Whereas the one which Firebase still have is Firebase ML. Firebase ML lets you to add on-cloud machine learning. And the major difference between on-cloud and on-device machine learning is that with on-cloud machine learning, the machine learning goes on right in your device. That means the prediction happens in your device. You have a model, you feed in data to the model, and model gives you the response. That's on-device machine learning. And on-cloud is about you have your data, you upload it to some server, there it do the processing, it gives you the result back from the server, and then you show the result back to the user. Now, the trade-off between both of them is that with ML Kit, you can add on-device machine learning, but because on-device, as this has to be done on the device, so when you compare between on-cloud and on-device machine learning, then on-cloud has better performance over on-device. Okay, now let me talk about the quality. So it doesn't matter how great the application is, whether it's for the website or for mobile. It's all about quality. If the quality is not good, then the chances of success drastically comes down. And that's what happened with the app quality too, or the website qualities. But how do you measure the quality? Any developers who create the application or the website, they create with the best source available. But the real testing begins when it goes live, because then user will use on various devices and various mobile browser and so many things. So Firebase offers Crashlytics, performance monitoring, test lab, and app distribution. Using Crashlytics, you can monitor the crash in real time. Performance monitoring is highly important for mobile applications. As compared to web, mobile is something which is most commonly used, and that's the place where you see the freezing issues. Most of the time, web takes time to load the content, but mobile application can have more issues. It could take time to load because of the freezing issues, app startup time, any Crashlytics related issues. So all those things can be easily monitored using Crashlytics and performance monitoring. Not just this, if you want to test your application on various devices, then Test Lab offers you that too. Using Test Lab, you can test your Android or iOS app right on the Firebase. Finally, about the app distribution. So app distribution is something like, say if you do not have the Play Store account with you, but you want to distribute it to your audience, then how do you do that? So to distribute to your audience, the one thing which you should do is either host it somewhere and then send the URL. Or the other approach is you use Firebase app distribution, you upload your APK or the IPA file on Firebase, it gives you the URL. Now the testers can join using that URL. Not just they join, but it also keeps track of all those users who have joined using the URL, so that you can disable any of the user whom you think that that user is not a potential user to test the application. By this way, it even gives you an ability to add security for the app distribution. Same way we have, so for Grow, we have analytics, predictions, cloud messaging, in-app message, dynamic link, remote config, and we'll see about few other services now. So as I said, Firebase is not just for mobile and web, but it's also for other platforms like C++, Unity. If you are creating games, then it's useful at that place also. For native application using C++, web as usual, Android, iOS, that's supported right from the beginning of Firebase. So using Firebase, if you are, say, a student or a professional, it really doesn't matter, because Firebase offers the high-grade applications, the high-grade performance from the services with free of cost to a certain extent. And then later on, you could pay the charges as you proceed further. This gives you an ability to create a prototype, and once that prototype is successful, then without changing the platform, you can deploy it to the production too. Because Firebase takes care of security, scalability, and the most important, it's so easy to implement all the services of Firebase. So it's just like you have the service and that's like a plug and play component. With just few lines of code, you can get started with Firebase services. And today we'll also see about how easy it is to add Cloud Firestore to Android application. And we are going to add it with just a single function. So let me first talk about the Firebase authentication. As I said, authentication is something which is most commonly seen across mobile applications and website. So why do we need authentication? Well, we need only genuine user to use our application. So we need authentication mechanism. But if you talk about having a platform where you could store user names, email, password, and all those things, then you need a stable and secure platform, because you do not want any hackers to come in between and steal all your user details. So Firebase provides a very high-level authentication mechanism for the mobile and web platform using Firebase authentication. It extends the APIs, which you can add it to the platforms which you are interested in, and then you could take advantage of Firebase hosted service, that's Firebase authentication, to add the authentication mechanism to your application. It supports so many ways to authenticate your application. It allows you to add Facebook authentication, Google, GitHub, Twitter, your custom email and password based authentication. Not just this, even Apple. Or the best of all is about the anonymous. Say if you're creating a game application, and that game application is like, you don't want your user to authenticate initially, let them just come play and enjoy the game. But later on, as they want to proceed forward, then you want them to authenticate. So what happens here is that you can add anonymous authentication. Using anonymous authentication, without asking user anything about their email ID, password, token, any such things required, you can just add Firebase authentication. It gives you a token. That token remains persistent until certain conditions. Using that as a reliable source, you can keep track of their progress. And as they log in, means as they sign up, then you can just copy paste the content which you have it with the anonymous token with their genuine account. Now let me talk about Cloud Firestore. So Cloud Firestore is a Firebase real-time database. It's a completely NoSQL and collection document-based structure. That means whatever content that you store on Cloud Firestore, that's based on collection and document based. With collection, do not store any data, but it stores collection. Collection do not store any data, but it stores document. And document in turn stores data. This document is again in the JSON, but it's not a pure JSON format, it's in a key value pair. So you can send your data as a hash map or just a model, then it automatically assign it to the key value pair. This key value pairs is limited to the document. So single collection can have any number of documents where your read and write is charged based on the number of collections and the number of documents. So number of collection is in a sense like, say, if one collection you have 100 documents, so the number of read and write is not just one, but it's going to be 100 because in that collection you read about 100 documents. So the structure of pricing policy here is about reading and writing on a document, but not fairly on the collection directly. The best part of using Cloud Firestore is that, say today, while using your application or website, you might be having 10 users, 20 users, 100 users. And then tomorrow, suddenly, if this 20, 100 users has suddenly turned out to be a million or a billion set of users, just overnight, then Firestore gives you an ability to auto handle this. It will automatically scale its infrastructure so that your app or your website will support that many users. It also supports offline handling. That means if you are using it in your application, then you need not to bother about creating an offline database for it. As you send your data on Firestore or get the data from Firestore, it sync those things offline to your mobile too. With Cloud Firestore, as I said, it's a real-time database. We have one more database, which is real-time database. So real-time database was initially the first database, the real-time database which Firebase has offered. Cloud Firestore came as an advancement for it. So real-time database and Cloud Firestore, both of them still exist. You could use any one of them, and Firebase website has listed down various scenarios where you could either choose real-time database or Cloud Firestore. But on a rough figure, if I have to make it clear, then if you have, say, an application which most often interact with server, like for example, you might have seen Ola or Uber, where they keep on constantly updating the driver location. For that kind of application, Firebase real-time database may be a good option. Just like Cloud Firestore, it also gives an ability for real-time updates, offline handling, and persistent storage. That means offline capability is supported for this too. However, real-time database is not that great for the scalability as compared to the Cloud Firestore. Cloud Firestore is highly scalable. And what do I mean by this is, say if you are adding more and more capabilities to your application, then it's an obvious case that at server side also you need more and more set of structures, reforms, and more set of datas. But as I said about the Cloud Firestore, which is collection and document based structure. So you could have one collection, in that collection you could have document, that document can again point to another collection. So by this way, you can create a structure which can be balanced and maintained quite easily. But when it comes to the real-time database, it's just a single JSON. And in a single JSON, you have to just keep on adding the content. So that's why maintaining a large set of database could be an issue here as compared to the Cloud Firestore. So Cloud Firestore and real-time database, they are the database which supports text, but not multimedia. But when we talk about the real applications, then our application is not just limited to the text. It also have images, audios, videos. So it does have a multimedia too. So how about if I have a set of images which I want to upload on Cloud Firestore or the real-time database? Because as this is not supported, then it's a straightforward case, I cannot do that. But that's something which is a requirement of my application or the website, where I need to show image along with some written textual content. So for that, we have cloud storage. With cloud storage, we can store multimedia content. So just have a bucket kind of concept. Bucket is, you can think as just a folder where you upload the data on cloud storage. Then cloud storage will give you a URL. That URL you can store it either on Cloud Firestore or the real-time database. Once you have that URL, now in your mobile application or the website wherever you're using it, you could access the multimedia using that URL. So on a rough understanding, if I have to have an application where I can have image and a raw text, then text I'll have it on cloud storage, cloud Firestore, and cloud storage I'll use it for having image. Then image, as soon as I upload it, I'll get the URL. That URL I'll again copy it back to the cloud Firestore. Well, the name is quite confusing, but Firestore is for textual real-time database. Storage is all about multimedia. Now, I've talked about real-time database, then storage where you can have the multimedia. Now think of a case that you are creating website, you have used storage, Firestore for all your processing data. That's looking good even, but now you want that website to reach to the world. Now to reach to the world, you have to host it somewhere. So Firebase hosting also allows you to host your application. And even if you have created using Firebase, so if you have created using Flutter, then you could even host your Flutter application on Firebase hosting. Now let me talk about Crashlytics. So as I said, that real testing begins when app goes online, means when it goes to the real users. So Firebase Crashlytics offers a real-time crash reporting service. That means as soon as your app crashes, it gives you a message there on the Firebase Crashlytics that this is the reason and that's the place where the application has crashed. By this way, you can keep track of what was the reason for the crash, and also in the scenario where you can log the content, it will tell you that what has led to the crash. It does give you an ability to have an external logs too, so that you could log based on your messages. Now let me talk about cloud messaging. So messaging is something which is most common, and you might have seen it across many of the application, and especially the e-commerce application. Notification is really a good way to engage your user. You might be having some sort of promotions or any particular reason where you need to push the content, like a reminder to use your application, reminder for the user to do some actions. For that, you need to send some sort of push notification to the user. That push notification can be sent using Firebase Cloud Messaging. This service is available for Android, iOS, and web. Not just this, it's also powered through Google Analytics. That means you can just target certain set of users rather than sending push notification to everyone. By this way, you can engage your user much better than just blindly sending push notification across to all set of audience. So that was about the Firebase services. And the last service which I'm going to talk today is about the remote config. Well, the prime reason why do I have added remote config today is to tell you about this, that remote config is one of the very widely used service of Firebase. It's free service, and your application, doesn't matter whether it's for mobile or for web, you can take advantage of remote config. Many a time you may see a behavioral change. That behavioral change could be negative or positive based on your application usage or a new update that you might have given. That behavioral change could either be related to churn and non-churn. That means set of users who are leaving the application or staying and using the application. So if you see that earlier user were engaging with the application or the website, but now they are not doing that much. So to understand this behavior pattern, what you may do is that you may proceed with the A/B testing, where one set of features could be delivered to a certain set of user and another to another set of users. For that, you'll need remote config. Not just this. If you want to control your app appearance and behavior without pushing update again to the Play Store or App Store, and same is true for website also. Instead of posting your web pages again and again, if you want to control it dynamically without maintaining the server, then you could use remote config. So how does it work is, it works on a principle of a key value pairs, where a key and value pair is always maintained locally too. That is what makes it different from the real-time database. So in real-time database, it's about the moment you launch the application, you should have connected to the internet. It fetches the data from internet, it shows the content. Remote config is not a replacement of database. It's just a place to configure and control certain things based on key value pair. So now this key value pair, whatever you're going to add it to the remote config, you maintain that key value pair in your application side too. Now, as user launch the application, initially at the first time they may not be connected to the internet. Well, now it doesn't really matter because you already have the key value pair right in the application that you are using. Now, based on the expiry time that you define, it tries to fetch the updated content back from the remote config. And this updation time should not be like, say, 1 minute or 2 minutes. Generally, you should keep this for around 40 minutes, 45 minutes, 1 hour, 2 hours, so that user will not see the frequent changes in the application. So if you want to take a dynamic control over your application, where you can toggle on and off certain features, change the theme, or add certain features based on the flag, if-else flag, A/B testing, all those things you could do using remote config. The best part is that it is available for Android, iOS, and web. So it's available for all the platforms. Now let me talk about Jetpack Compose. So this was all about the Firebase services which are commonly used across the application. Firebase is not just limited to these services, but there are so many services as I have listed in the first page. But what I have covered is just the initial services which are most commonly used and may be helpful for all the developers, whether the developer is working in a startup or MNC, or even for the students. They can get started with this, and as they proceed forward, then they could even use the same structure, same database, and scale it to the production grade. So one platform for all the services. That's what the Firebase is. Now let me talk about Jetpack Compose. So Jetpack Compose is Google new modern UI toolkit. Using Jetpack Compose, you can create UI for your application. Well, the reason why I'm saying you can create UI is because it's all about programming now. Unlike the existing ones, so if you are the Android developer, then you might know about the XMLs. If you have to create Android application, then you have to use XML. But now with Jetpack Compose, it's all about Kotlin. So if you know Kotlin, then it's very easy for you to get started with Jetpack Compose. So Jetpack Compose is all about modern and the declarative modern UI toolkit. So here we proceed with the declarative programming. This is completely built with Kotlin. The best of all is that now you need not to write the huge amount of code. For example, just to add a list of content. For example, you just want to list, say, a number from 1 to 100 using a recycler view. Then roughly you need to write somewhere around 20 to 30 to 40 lines of code just for that limited piece of content. We just want to show numbers from 1 to 100 because you need to add it to the XML, then set the initialization like layout manager, assign it to the recycler view, create adapter, create layout for the item. All those things adds up to the code. But now with Jetpack Compose, if you want to do the same thing where you want to list, say, a number from 1 to 100, this is now reduced to around 2 to 3 lines of code. So let's see about the views that we have with the existing Android UI toolkit with what's been changed with Jetpack Compose. So if you want to display a text you can think of as a label. So if you want to show titles, labels, subtitles, for that, with the existing UI toolkit, we have text view. With Jetpack Compose, this became text. Now to display images, we had image view with the existing UI toolkit. That is now replaced with image. Same way, if you want to have a card, so card view is like you have a rounded corner, say a layout which is also having a shadow. That is now replaced with card. And as I said, no more XML. Either it's your layout, colors, dimensions. For none of them, you need dimensions. For dimensions, now you can directly say a number 10.dp. You have any dimensions, say 24, 32, whatever dimensions that you have it. You write that number, then say .dp. That's it. Colors.xml that we use to have it for defining the theme of the application. Now for that, we have material themes.kd. Or it's not just material theme, but the name of the application. And in that name of the application, you'll see, so theme gets added to that. So as you create a template, so you'll see themes getting generated automatically for you, and that theme is automatically applied to the by default theme composable that is given to you. So all those things are now available with a KT file directly. But the overall question is that why do we need this? We had the existing UI toolkit which was working quite well. Then what's the need of having a newer UI toolkit? Well, the prime reason for that one is existing UI toolkit is good, but that existing UI toolkit is not something which was serving the purpose. When I say about serving the purpose, then what I mean is that, say, if you want to add certain features, if you want to customize it, then what you will do there? For any customization, you need to create a subclass of it, do the changes, and then based on changes, you show the content back on UI. But that's not straightforward because you have to extend that class, have your own drawables and other things, which is a very lengthy process. That's for the customization. But if I talk just about the existing UI toolkits too, then for the existing UI toolkit, for creating UI, it's all clumsy if you have a complex UI. Why is that? It's because you have a very hard coupling between UI and your KT file. But when it comes to Jetpack Compose, whether you want to add customization, create complex UI, or even a simple UI, it really doesn't matter. It's so much simplified now with less code, and instead of hard coupling, it follows cohesion. That means all your coupling is limited to a certain function. but not to the entire applications or to the KT files. Let's see this, for example. Say you have a composable and you have a function, you have a name of the function, and then as a parameter. This is not something which is, say, which is so fancy here, because it's just a function, fun, greeting, and a parameter. If you have used Kotlin before, then you might be well aware with this. What makes it a bit different from function is @composable. When you add @composable, then it gives an indication to the compiler that this function is not an ordinary function, rather it contains a piece of code that has to be drawn on UI. In our case, it's text. Also, the one change here is that function name should always start with a lowercase, and then it follows a camel case. But to differentiate this with the normal function, the one pattern that is followed here is start the function with a capital letter for all the composables. With this, one structure that it follows is that your state will always flow down and even flows up. What do I mean by this is, function of greeting is a state. Now, if you want to add a click event to the text, then rather than defining your click event right to this direct text, even pass what should happen when you click on this text as a parameter using higher order function. And then assign that higher order function back to the onClick. By this way, you have a stabilized control over where what's going on, how your state is flowing down and event is flowing up. That's where I said state flows down and event flows up. Now let's see about few of the composables. As I said, that with Jetpack Compose, you need not have to create uh, or you need not to write a very huge amount of code, and also you need not have to create different adapters and the custom classes. So here it's all about function, no classes. You have a function, you call that function, whatever changes which you wanted to the properties behavior, you pass it as a parameter to the function. For example, here we could see image. Now this image is having multiple borders. One border is a blue color, another one is red color, and the content scale here is crop. If we have to create this with the existing one, we'll see that now. But before that, if we have to create this with the existing layout, then what do we need? Well, the first thing is the drawable. We need a frame layout. On the frame layout, we'll need to set a drawable, and we need to set two drawables, one with blue color background, another one with red color. Then we define DP, and eventually we set image. But now all those things are get sorted out with just a single function. You call image composable, you provide the resource, which could either be in the drawable. Content description is for the accessibility, where it tells about what this image is. So it's actually good practice to define it, but if you do not have it, then you can also specify null. But generally, it's a good practice to define something about that image. Then content scale, as I said, it's the content scale is crop. But what makes it more exciting here is the modifier. If you see this image, then we have a margin and a padding both. This is not starting right from the screen, but rather it's leaving some sort of space between left, right, top, and bottom. That's all because we have specified modifier.padding 12 dp first. And after that, we said that we want a height of 240 dp and occupy the entire width of the screen. And then for the border, the max thing that we need to do is that just call border. Initially, I said occupy the 4 dp width for this border, which is a blue color, and then occupy the 8 dp width for the red color border. That's why you could see first is blue color, and then later on you'll see red color. Eventually, if you see on UI, they both are a 4:4 DP. The reason why is that is because either you specify border 2 times, 3 times, or 5 times. It really doesn't matter. It starts from the corner of the composable. So 4 DP is overlapped with the blue border, and then eventually the next 4 DP is shown on UI. That's why it's look like it's of both of them are of 4 and 4 DP. And finally, the last one is about padding. By this way, I've given padding to the image itself. So modify is all about changing the appearance of your composable, and the way you call these properties, that's really important. Like here you could see, when I called padding initially, before setting the width and height, it has acted like a margin for me. And later on, if I have used padding, then it has acted like a padding. Now let's see about the outline button. Outline button is about, you have a button, that button will have an boundary. So if we have to create that kind of UI, again with the Extreme UI toolkit, then we need to depend back on the drawable, set the background, and then you change the color. But here with Jetpack Compose, you have outline button composable. You have your click events. These click events act like an on-click listener. That means now no longer have to create a view object and then call set on-click listener. All those things are not required because that introduced to tight coupling. Here, as I said, it tried to avoid tight coupling. So you have a button, you have on-click event. As the user click on a button, you'll get this lambda getting triggered again and again. Then eventually you have colors. This colors is helpful to change the background color or the content color. Like as you've seen earlier, this submit is of blue color. That's because we have specified that the content color should be blue in color. And eventually what should be shown on this outline button is that something you define here with the text. Now this one is quite exciting because this is quite difficult to achieve with the Extreme UI toolkit. It's possible, but it's going to take a more amount of code that you need to write. So you have a text. To that text, if you need to add shadow, how could you do that? Well, the max thing which you need to do here with Jetpack Compose is you have a shadow property. You just give a shadow and the blur radius with a color. That's it. So text is a composable, which you have seen initially with the greeting composable. To text, you can also specify the style. To this text style, you can define the color, font size, font families, and all sort of things which is useful on text. That's possible with the text style. Then you have a shadow. On that shadow, you just create a shadow object, give radius and color. By this little piece of code, you see this in UI. Now this one is something which I've created. It's about the story UI. This kind of UI is quite common across many applications. You might have seen it on Instagram, LinkedIn, and this is UI where your image is displayed for certain seconds, and as that second expires, it automatically switches to another image. Something which is quite commonly seen on WhatsApp. So WhatsApp status have this kind of UI where as your certain time limit is expired, then it automatically shows the next status. If we have to create this kind of UI with Jetpack Compose, let's see how can we do that. So the max amount of code which you need to write for this one is this only. You have your list of images, which you could either have it in drawable, or if you don't have it in drawable, if you have a dynamic images, then have it as a URL. Then you have a list of URL, then call the stories composable, where on a minimum level you have to specify about the number of pages, And what should happen when this story is complete? Then event then eventually it will provide you the index for every image. So as it provides you the index for that, you use your image composable there and load the content. For loading from a network, we have coil image, which works quite well. If you have it from the drawable, you could directly use the image composable. You could say painter equals to painter resource, and then with the page index, load the content based on the list of images that you have. Also, you might have seen toast messages in your application. Toast messages are useful to have some sort of descriptive messages, which are short and come on UI for a very short duration and then eventually pops out. So it's like user is logging out of the application or user is successfully signed in. So if you want to show a very short message to the user, then you use toast messages. But now with Jetpack Compose, you can also have an ability to customize the toast message. You could either have the default toast, colorful toast where you can change the background color of the text, the shape of the toast messages. Even you could add icons, icon of different colors, same colors, or even a snack bar. So snack bar is like where you have something which comes at the bottom, and then based on user action on a button click, it goes away. That's one type of snack bar. Another one is just which comes and goes out. So using Jet Toast, you could create this kind of toast messages. For that, what you need to do is that you just create a mutable state of object and have a toast composable. You show your messages there, you show the toast, and then what should happen when toast is shown? Well, one thing which you might be seeing here is that we have remember and mutable state of. So remember is about positional memoization. This works in a principle like if you have a function, and if the function have a properties as a parameter, so if the parameter of function is not changing, then it's one of the most probable case that the result that function is going to give you, that will also remain same. So positional memoization works in a similar fashion. As the parameter for the remember is not changing, rather we are not even giving any parameter to remember. So whatever block of code that we have inside remember will only get executed once. So now, even if the recomposition happens, that means if this composable is called once again, it really doesn't matter. This show toast will not get reinitialized back to false. By that way, it maintains the state. Now, finally, before I conclude this, let me talk about Jet Firestore. So initially at the start of the session, I've talked about, we'll see how we can add Cloud Firestore to our application. So now we'll see using Jet Firestore, which is a library which I've created. This library helps you to add the capability of Cloud Firestore with just a single function. That is Jet Firestore Composable. With Jet Firestore, the first thing which you need to do is you have to specify the path. As I talked earlier, Cloud Firestore is all about the collection and document-based data structure. So what it means is that you have a collection, that collection have document, the document internally have the data. Now, as collection do not store data on its own, it stores document, that stores data. So you could either specify path till collection, which will give you the list of all documents, or if you already know about which document you want to fetch, so you can specify the ID of the document. So it will be like collection, you specify the collection ID, then dot document, and specify the document ID. If you have a hierarchy for this, then again this goes on. You have collection, dot document, then dot collection, dot document. So in this way, it can go on. Then if you want to add some sort of query to it, like you need to order based on certain parameters, then you can specify those things also. Eventually, as I said earlier, that Cloud Firestore is about the real-time database. That means if any value in the database changes, it will send the updated content back to all the connected devices. For that, you could either use on single-time collection fetch or on real-time collection fetch. That's for collection. If you have document, then it will be on single-time document fetch or on real-time document fetch based on what you're using. Eventually, you get the content in this Lambda where you have values and exceptions. Like here, I've seen just fetch the data once. I don't want to set the real-time listener. Once you fetch the data, leave it. So on single-time collection fetch is going to give me values or exception as we get the data. Now that is being assigned back to the book list, which is of mutable state type. Then eventually we show the content back in the list where I have a column where I'll show the list first, and then at the bottom I show row where I have button and well, there was one more content. I believe I have removed it. So you can avoid writing row here. It's about a list and a button at the bottom. So with this, now you have a content which you were earlier having on cloud storage, means Cloud Firestore, to your application just using Jet Firestore. Also, if you need to add the pagination support, then the max thing which you need to do is just set limit on single item collection fetch. Pagination is all about at a single instance, how many records you want to load. Like for example, your collection may be having 1,000 document. Like here, the collection is book. These books may be having say 1,000 or 10,000 documents. If I do not specify the limit, then what it will do is that it will download all the documents, whatever this collection have. That eventually is going to uh, be a concern for the developer because your read and write is something which is charged. So you have a free limit of around 20,000 writes per day and 50,000 read per day. So you need to keep track of those things. And it really doesn't make sense like if you're just showing 10 content on UI but loading the entire 1,000 or 10,000 elements. So for that, the best one is to add limit that how many documents you want to load on a single stretch. And as the user takes some action like scroll down to the page or click on a button, you just call pagination.load next page. Then it will load the next set of limit that you have specified. By this way, you just load the content which is very minimal and that is helpful for the user to see the content at once. Then based on their action, you load the content. So that was all about adding Jet Firestore to your Android application and get the content in either real time or single time collection fetch. Well, I have all this content where I have talked about how you could use Jet Firestore, how to use Composable, what is Composable, Jetpack Compose, so many content on Android, Kotlin, and Firebase topics. So if you want to know more about it, then tune in to All Techies, which is my YouTube channel. There you could get information about Kotlin, Android, and Firebase, and especially on the Jetpack Compose. So that's it for today's session. Thank you. If you have any questions, then we could proceed towards the questions.
So actually, I have submitted the questions.
Okay, sure. Okay, so the question is about how to change the app name in phone authentication message code. Well, phone authentication, when it comes for phone authentication, so Firebase do allow you to have your own messages You could have your own custom dialogues, and even we have a name which is defined in the settings. So you could change the name there in the settings, which is nothing but the project name and the project ID. So project ID is something which you cannot change, it defines, and then the name is something which you could change. Uh, and the app name for authentication is all about the way you create your alert messages, so it's purely under your control. How to place location marker in Flutter Firebase. So for location marker, it's about you will need a real-time database provided that you are using these locations in real time. So Cloud Firestore supports you to add the longitude and latitude. So as you have your Flutter application, send the lat and long data, and Cloud Firestore will store it, and then eventually you could fetch based on another query. So Cloud Firestore have a support for this. How to combine a song as playlist in Cloud Firestore. So if you have multiple songs and you want to combine all of them together, then Cloud Firestore, how to combine a song as a playlist in Cloud Firestore. So I believe it's like you have multiple songs and you want to create a playlist where you will have a set of songs. So for that, what you could do is that as you upload the song on cloud storage, then you get a URL. You create a playlist collection, and that collection can have the document, and in that document you can specify the URLs. So playlist will be your collection, and songs URL will be the document. Then eventually in your web or mobile application, wherever you're trying to fetch this one, you could get this content back from the Cloud Firestore. How to play the songs by playlist URL in Flutter Fire. Well, I haven't used Flutter Fire, but I believe that it's about how to play songs by playlist URL. Okay, so I believe the question is about how you can play a song when you have a URL with Flutterfire. So Flutterfire will have multiple, what do you say about the SDKs. So what you'll need is uh, cloud storage. Cloud storage SDK, as you add it to the application, then it gives you an ability to download the multimedia also. So Cloud Firestore will just give you the URL. Then you need the cloud storage. Cloud storage will give you an ability to either upload or download the content. The moment you have downloaded the content, now you could play it using the existing multimedia or whatever player which you have it. One of the good thing which is supported by cloud storage is that, say if you're downloading a song and at 90 or 99% your internet goes off, now if internet comes back once again, it will not start from the 0% once again, rather it starts from the place where it has left the download. So that was about this playlist URL. Now, is Google alter our data in Cloud Firestore? So no, so Google do not do that. Rather, Google just gives you this ability where you have your data, you have your databases, and you can have all the content which you want related to the data, and even not even Google is going to read those content. These are all about the privacy policy. So your content is highly secured. What Google gives you is it gives you an ability where it will automatically scale the infrastructure. But in any case, it will not do like you have uploaded certain content on the Cloud Firestore and they say that no, it's a policy violation. Your application should not allow this kind of content. And because of this, we are deleting this content from the Cloud Firestore. So they don't do that because they don't read the content which you are adding to the Cloud Firestore. Rather, it's a responsibility of admin to go through the data, filter out the data, and delete unwanted content. But Google, in any case, is not going to do on anyone behalf for that altering the data on Cloud Firestore.
Yeah, questions are over, sir.
Okay, great.
Yeah. Thank you everyone for watching the live. Yeah, bye.
Thank you for having me today.
Yeah, thank you.